Thank you everyone, thank you. My name's John Lawrence, as you may already know, National Housing Party, United Kingdom. Now, I've got a bit of a speech here, but I just want to say something about the times we're living in now. My Uncle Richard's written a couple of books, and I'm just taking a section out of one of the books. In 1955, he was a flag bearer for the scout troop in Oldham. So it was 10 years after the war had finished, and when they did the march and got to the central Oldham, to the church in Oldham, he said there was tens of thousands of people there celebrating. Now obviously throughout the years I've been to the Remembrance Day marches and stuff like that, and in the 80s there were thousands of people. When I went on Sunday there were just like 150. People, that's it, 150 people gone down from all them years ago. Obviously people have died and stuff like that, and where the marches used to take an hour to pass you, it just took 2 minutes this time. So it just shows you how we're dying off, if I want to say. The British Empire is dying off, and I think it's the end of the empire now. But I just wanted to mention that. So that's my Uncle Richard in 1955. And like I said, there was only 100 people, 150 people at the last remembrance in Oldham. But besides that, it's what we see on the news and the media as well. And there's an orchestra in London. It's got £1 million tax money, £1 million taxpayers' money to promote it and give money and all that. And when the Queen died, the founder and the one who deals with the orchestra or whatever, both have CBEs, so they get these through the Queen. And she was saying that they wouldn't play the national anthem because of the Queen's links to the empire and stuff like that. But the hypocrisy is they accepted them CBEs and OBEs, and there's hundreds of thousands of people in Britain who have these awards and they don't give a toss about the British. They don't give a toss about our history, culture, and these are the first people to start slagging the Queen off and stuff like that. But I wouldn't take that award if I had that kind of attitude. But these are the kind of people that we have to deal with in the UK today, and it's just so wrong. It's just so wrong. It just is so wrong, and the disrespect that the UK gets is not deserved in any way. It's not deserved in any way. And I've never been one saying that we've been perfect throughout our time. We haven't. But there's no country, no kind of empire in the world that's ever been perfect. It just doesn't work like that. But obviously, because of England's link to transatlantic slave trade, we have to be the enemies of everybody. And there are a lot worse people, a lot of other countries who did things so worse in the slave trade, but they never get mentioned. I just want to put one of these things was when the British Empire ended the slave trade, they sent out the ships to stop other ships moving along. Portugal, who were the first to start it and the last to end it, they knew it was coming to an end, so they were double packing their ships with double the amount of slaves that you'd normally take, losing half of them by the time they get to America and still making a profit. Nobody says anything. Nobody says anything about Portugal, and I think that's like wrong. That is so horrible. And they were absolutely using the time to earn money, but nobody says anything about Portugal. No one says anything about any other country. No one says anything about the kind of people who had slaves in America, from Jews to black people. No one says anything like that. And these are all missed out on our history. And it winds me up so much because I know all this. And it just winds me up. And I fight against this. One of the things that we're going to do as a national party is tackle these kind of things. We're going to tackle false histories being taught to our kids in school. We're going to tackle people like this orchestra who get, remember, £1 million taxpayers' money, and then they won't play the Queen's anthem. know what I mean? That's just so disgraceful. And they take them CBEs as well. And we're going to tackle these kind of things at a school level. I'm going to tackle them at. There's about half a dozen schools in my ward, and as soon as I'm elected councillor, I'm going to be doing petitions to get books out of the libraries of the school and stuff like that, and I'll be focusing like that in schools in Oldham. And I know it'll work because we have a diverse kind of people in schools in Oldham, and certain sections of the community are going to agree with me 100% on things like gender identity and stuff like that in the schools. But nobody will speak out, everyone's scared, but I'm not scared and I will speak out. So a little bit there of stuff we're going to be tackling as we become a better known political party. You know, when I was younger, I travelled all over the country. We've got family in Chelsea in London, Birmingham, Peterborough, Bradford and Leeds, and obviously Greater Manchester. So I've travelled to all these places when I was younger, and it wasn't so bad. And sometimes, as long as I was with I was the lead person who was travelling, I could take my sisters, my younger sisters, and stuff like that. And at the time, I never realised why my dad kept my sisters in, and why my dad was so restrictive on what they did within the family rather than me. Until years later, when I grew up, there's so much sex abuse and child abuse on our children coming at all angles, and certainly from the immigrant community and certain sections of different communities. And I think my dad saw that, but it never stopped us travelling, And so, I mean, Peterborough, from the late 80s onwards, that's where I was a lot. Birmingham, again, late 80s. London, really from the early 90s. I spent some time staying in Enfield, and it was nice then. I have been, a couple of years ago, I did go down to Enfield. It looked like a war zone, but it was never like that in the early 90s. It was never like that. Greater Manchester, obviously, we've got family all over Greater Manchester. So I'm not ignorant to other areas, other towns and cities in the UK. And what I see in everyone is how divided we are. And it's one of the things I want to try and tackle. In Oldham, we've got 20 wards, and there's between each ward, it's like the separate countries. They don't like working together. They won't work together. Someone's always got an argument with someone else. Somebody wants to be the boss, and someone wants to be and they're fighting with other people who want to be the bosses, and there's no community. An example of that community spirit is when Myra Hindley and the other guy were going to court. The streets in Manchester were lined with the members of the public, and they're all throwing fruit and vegetables at the meat wagon when it were coming past. Now we're not allowed to say anything against them, and nobody comes out, nobody stands up. And this was the entire community of Greater Manchester coming out to make sure these people got to court and got what they deserve. There's none of that now. Nobody will say nothing, no one will stand up and say anything. Nobody will go to the police and tackle the police on why they're not doing stuff. And it's just so wrong. It's so wrong. I wish we had that kind of community now, and I think that there wouldn't be half as much trouble that we have now if people were like that in communities. We're not, but you know, I believe our government and the globalists, they want to break up our family. We know that. We know they're breaking up the family unit. They don't like the nuclear family now, do they? And that's quite obvious. So all that adds to our communities being so distanced and stuff like that. In the past, communities next to each other would work together to solve problems, to do stuff for the community and that, but they don't now. We're so divided But again, I think this is something that's been indoctrinated into us as kids. Me, that kind of attitude, instead of us, which it should be. And I just don't see them family things no more. When I was a little kid, everybody on the street knew who I was. They all knew who my parents were. We all knew, lived next door to us, that side, this side. Now you can come onto a street and people won't know who lives 3 doors away from them. You know, they just don't know. And that's a big thing about our communities and breaking them up. So that needs to be dealt with. And I mean, obviously we've got this terrible thing happening. We've got all these immigrants coming in, and I just want to quote a quote here of someone famous. You might be able to get him, but you might not. We must be mad. We must be literally mad as a nation to be permitting the annual inflow of some. Now the figure here is 50,000 in a year. Right, so this is going back to 1960s, this, but now that figure is 1 million. It's 1 million, it's round about 1 million, if not more, a year. Dependents who are, for the most part, the material of the future growth of the immigrant descended population. It's like watching a nation busily engaged in keeping its own funeral pyre lit. Enoch Powell, and he's one of my favourites. I've done a lot of reading on Enoch Powell and stuff like that, and he's branded with such politically correct names. When the first immigrants came in the Windrush days, and it's obviously nobody in England wanted them. No, none of the MPs, nobody wanted these immigrants in the beginning. And there was hostility put towards the immigrants, but the same roles would be reversed if, like, loads of white immigrants went to somewhere in Africa. The same kind of thing would happen, but it's never talked about. It's just white people are the worst, aren't they? You know, this guy was a linguist, and he did army intelligence in India. He ended up learning Urdu, and he liked the South Asian area, which is a Bangladeshi area. He liked that, but what he not seen was the difference between 2 different cultures, which was Muslim and the Indians. And he's seen that difference, and he's seen the kind of trouble that comes with it. So I can understand him saying a quote like this when he's in England, because he's already seen this. He's not seen all these kind of things happening in other countries. He was the only guy who stood up against Parliament on their treatment of some of the African nations. He was the only guy, and he still got shouted down. He's the only guy who stood up and said something against what the British Empire were doing to certain countries in Africa in the 50s, and he was the only guy who said anything, and he was shouted down. He gets branded a racist, but just don't sound a racist person to me. Not when you read all his stuff. Just does not sound like that. But again, these are politically correct ways and words that have been brought in to demonise us all. So a little about my campaign now. So I did my first local election campaign in May. My first one this. I'd say for a good 5-6 years beforehand, I'm at the precipice where I want to run in an election. I nearly did with Britain First, but I never got there. But we started the party and I ran in my first election. We just had a by-election, which I didn't do so well in, but I'm learning. I'm learning the lessons. All the political parties in Oldham, a lot of them already know all these lessons, so I'm learning them for the first time. It's been good, I must say. It's been good. I'm not shy, me. I'll talk to anyone, no matter what colour, race, religion. If they're on my list, to get talked to. And you know, and so by May, that in 2023 will be 3 elections, local elections in a year. And I'm not blowing my own trumpet. I can expect someone when they're running a first election to do an election, maybe 1 in a year. 2, yeah, but 3, come on. And you know, one of the major things that I've found though is I'm not getting the help that I really need. I have had plenty of help off Pat and a few other people who live in Oldham, but a lot of my friends who I've built up over this past 5 years are not helping me, and they haven't helped me. So I'm gonna be a bit bad, and I'm gonna do posts that make them feel guilty, because nobody can say that Big John don't do nothing. I've done about 300 political demos, events, Conservative conference, Labour conference, in just 3 years, 4 years. And that is something that's pretty hard to match for anybody. So I know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I'm loving the campaign. Local elections is the way to go. Oldham at the moment, the Labour have 34 seats. Next May, they could be losing the majority in Oldham. That'll be the first time in 4 years. The Labour Party have absolutely ruined Oldham. They're politically correct. Anybody who goes up against them, they ended up calling them far right and stuff like that. They go after you as well. If they find out where you work, the Labour Party's, the Labour Party leader, Sean Fielding, in 2019, approached a woman's works and said that she was far right. But what did this woman do to deserve this? All she did was contact the English Heritage Foundation about some green land near where she lives, because the council wanted to build houses on it. So she won by getting the English, by getting the heritage people to say that Oldham couldn't build houses on this site. So the then council leader, Sean Fielding, went on a trolling mission, started on it, and ended up writing to her employer, and because she knew people who he was branding far right, he branded her far right as well and tried getting her sacked. And this is a council leader, it's not a minion, this is a council leader, this, on 100 grand a year, and that's what he did. And I'm going to be brutally honest, if I was 30 years old, he tried that with me, I'd be waiting outside his house for, and he'd be getting that. I'm sorry, I have to say these things, I'm not lying, I don't want to lie. I want to tell you how I would have felt if I was 30 years old. I'm 55 now and I'm much more calmer and relaxed, and obviously I wouldn't go to that point. He also, a woman, a local activist called Debbie, she went down to outside his house and did a live video, had a megaphone and said a few things about the Labour Council. She never said anything threatening. She got arrested by the police. Ended up taking her to court. When it got to court, the judge threw it out, said she hadn't done nothing wrong. So she went and did it again, and then the police ended up at her door, and she did it on a live video, and she said, well, the judge said that I've not done nothing wrong, and just slammed door in front of the police. But this is the power that our Labour Council have with the police in Oldham and Greater Manchester. So how am I going to deal with that? Well, I'm not even going to talk to the sergeant. I'm not talking to the PC. I go talking to the Chief Constables, me. And the last time I talked to the Chief Constable of Oldham, I turned round and said, all police, you're a national disgrace, you might as well be sex offenders, crooks and gangsters. And that's video recording. It was in front of Andy Burnham. I don't know many other people who would have the bottle to say that to a Chief Constable, but I did. And I met a couple of other Chief Constables at the Mayor's question time, and I'm not afraid of talking to them. Obviously, I've got issues with the police. I'd be an idiot if I said I haven't. I want to have faith in our police force, but they don't show that they have faith to us. We had Sir Everard killed in London. I said this, called them all crooks, gangsters and paedophiles last December. And then just recently, past couple of weeks, it's come out that they're vetting people wrong. And that's one of the things I said to the copper. I said, better vetting. That's what I said to him, better vetting. And it's now in the national newspapers, they haven't vetted people, they've took on crooks, gangsters and sex offenders into the police force. You know what I mean? And, you know, so that's how I'm going to go forward in Oldham. I'm going to talk to the big wigs, the leader of Oldham Council, the chief constable. I'm not going to talk to any minions. They're not worth it. And when you talk to a minion, it don't go nowhere. So I'll be taking issues directly to the police and stuff like that. So that's another thing I want to do. And again, I'll be honest, I really don't have faith. I want to have faith in our police force, but I can't have any faith in them because of what they do. They treat us like criminals when we're campaigning against Islamic terrorism or 22 people blown up in Manchester, and they treat us badly. They do treat us badly. But then again, I mean, the feedback I've had off the police in Manchester that I'm all right, I'll do things that they want, but when I talk about the police, I'm not nice. And when the police line us up, I go to each individual policeman and start talking about a victim of gang rape and say, why weren't you doing nothing? And why have you got kids and stuff? And they hate it. They hate me talking like that to them, but I'm only being truthful, you know. So again, going forward, it's not talking to the minions. I'm going to try and keep up talking to the big wigs and stuff like that. We can ask questions, we can put questions forward to our council meetings and stuff like that. And I mean, our Labour Council, we set up the National Housing Party because the housing issue in the UK is probably the biggest issue other than Islamic terrorism, if you ask me, on the people of the United Kingdom. More so in Oldham and Milltown, where we don't have family-friendly streets and roads. We don't. You'll come out of your front door, you've got a little path, then there's a main road with buses going on, and at the back of the house you've got a 8x6 yard, and that's what a family has to live in Oldham, and it's no good for kids or anything like that. But just earlier on in the year, the council approved plans to have an Indian temple built. So they built the Indian temple. It looks nice inside, all that. But the fact was, they built it on land that was supposed to be used for housing. You know what I mean? And we've got an housing crisis. Last week they had a meeting in the council about the housing crisis in Oldham. So I was the first person emailing him, saying, why are you allowing temples and mosques then? We've got an housing crisis. If I get on the council, my plan is when I get on the council, one of the first things I'm going to do, I'm going to go to a meeting, I'm going to say, have we got an housing crisis? When everyone says yes, I don't want any religious buildings built then until we've sorted out our housing crisis. We're against religious buildings built, but I want them to know before we get big and we're campaigning against any kind of religious buildings, but that I don't want them in my town. You know what I mean? And that's what we'll put up against. But a lot of these issues can be easily solved as long as we do them in the right way. I'll be doing them as a councillor. That's how I'll try to solve some of my issues as a councillor and bring in projects and stuff like that to the council and having a voice. So, I mean, next year is definitely the most important election in Oldham history that I know of in my life, and I'm 55 years old. I don't know of a more important election in Oldham or Greater Manchester than this one in Oldham next year. So I'm looking forward to it. We've had boundary changes, so all 60 councillors' positions are up for election, and the 3 members of parliament positions are also up for election. So it's a good one, but I'm learning. I'm not really one to make the same mistake twice. It's very rare, and I have made mistakes, but I won't be making them again, and that's how I learn. I'm not been put off by my recent result. I've actually been more motivated to do more. And I want to sorry, I'm not too much talking now. That's about it for now. Who's up next, Pat?